So I think it's fairly safe to say that despite the acclaim that the Stormlight Archive has had, Wind and Truth has not been universally accepted as a masterpiece by the readership. So, is it as bad as all that? Hello and welcome to the Book Thing. My name is Mark, and this is my review for Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Right, so I don't think it's possible to talk about part 5 of a story of anything without giving spoilers to parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you haven't read any of the Stormlight Archive, then I don't know why you're watching this. I'm grateful, but I don't know why. Even so, I'm going to try and mostly stay spoiler-free in this. So Wind and Truth picks up pretty much straight away from where Rhythm of War left off. So we're at the point where there's going to be a competition between the champions of Odium and the champion chosen by Dalinar in 10 days' time, which is going to decide the fate of the lands of Roshar. Due to the terms of the agreement with Odium, the borders of these lands will be frozen in 10 days' time. So once those 10 days have passed, whoever has control of the various different lands and wherever those borders are, that's where they will then be fixed in perpetuity. So there are numerous battlefronts in order to try and defend those positions for those final 10 days. And in the interim, various other things is happening. So Dalinar and Navani are on a quest to try and find the power of the god Honor. Kaladin is accompanying Szeth to the land of Shinovar, where various things are going on to do with the Heralds. Shallan, along with Renarin and Relaine, are trying to hunt down the Ghostbloods. Adolin is supporting one of the siege fronts in the kingdom of Azimir. And Sazed, who is now the leader of the Windrunners, is trying to defend the Shattered Plains. And we also get the perspective of various other characters like Venli and Yasna and Lift. And we also get a lot of perspective of Teravangian, who is the new host of Odium. So, is Wind and Truth as bad as some people are saying it is? I don't think so. Even though it is very long, the plot does sort of move along at a pretty decent pace. And quite frankly, the vast majority of the characters, these are characters we've kind of grown to love over the space of this entire series. And it is still enjoyable to spend time in their company again. But all that being said, this is a book that has some problems. And I'm not going to spoil what happens at the end, but I will say that Sanderson left himself a job to do with a lot of loose ends to tie up and conclude by the end of this story. And I'm not so certain that he's succeeded in that. Given the fact that this is the end of a cycle and he's not going to be returning to the Stormlight Archive for the best part of a decade, if anything, it feels like it's more open-ended now than it was at the end of any of the previous books. And that's kind of disappointing considering how long it takes to get there, because this is a long book. This is one of the longest books I have ever read. And to get to the end of that without it having enough of a satisfying conclusion is definitely going to rub people up the wrong way. Did it need to be this long? Probably not. I don't think the plot gets bogged down very much at any point. It does seem to go along at a pretty good pace, but there's just a lot there, and I think you could have probably knocked out about 20% of it, and it made not much material difference to the overall experience of the book. And this is a bit of a problem with some authors when they get to the point where they're that big and they have been that successful that people don't want to edit them and they don't want to tell them that actually no, you might want to think about not having that in there anymore. And I think that seems to have happened with Brandon Sanderson. And the length of it is only part of it. There are other things which I feel that a proper editorial team might have warned him against doing. First of all, I gave A Court of Mist and Fury a lot of flack for use of modern language sticking out like a sore thumb in the text. And I have to say, Wind and Truth, it's kind of egregious the amount of modernisms that it sticks into the text. And some of it is odd because a lot of it is to do with mental health and psychology, and seeing terminology from that cropping up is weird. But then on top of that, you also get there, I think at one point someone actually says, let's kick some fused ass. I mean, Jesus, come on, Brandon. I think you can do a bit better than that. And that dialogue there isn't the only problem. It seems that, and I noted this a little bit with some of the secret projects, and certainly with the second era of Mistborn, as time goes on, Brandon Sanderson is much more confident in his humor and putting humor into his books. The problem with that is Brandon Sanderson is not a very funny man. His ability to plot things out is exceptional. He is not a comedian. His jokes are really bad dad jokes. And I know what bad dad jokes look like because I'm a father and my jokes are absolutely bloody awful. And yeah, Sanderson's humor kind of just makes you roll your eyes. And going back to the modernisms of language to do with things like mental health and neurodiversity and stuff like that, it's good that those things are included, and they have been included in Stormlight Archive right from the get-go. But unfortunately, most of the characters who we've seen having to struggle with the mental health, primarily characters like Kaladin and Shalon, they've kind of already gone through their arc. And yet, the amount of prominence that mental health, neurodiversity and all of that takes in the story is, if anything, significantly more elevated in Wind and Truth. And he doesn't quite come to the conclusion that the apocalypse can be averted with counseling and psychotherapy, but it's not far off. So Wind and Truth, I think, is probably a 3-star book. I'm complained about it a lot, but it was enjoyable while I was going through it, enjoyable enough. It might not necessarily be the conclusion that we were looking for, but it is a conclusion. I don't think it's the car crash that some reviewers have portrayed it as, but by the same token, it is without a shadow of a doubt the weakest book in the Stormlight Archive series, which is a shame because up until now, and I'd even include Rhythm of War in this, which a lot of people don't like very much, but I actually think the Stormlight Archive has been very, very strong up until now, and it finishes on a bit more of a whimper than it does with a bang, which is a shame. But still, I gave it 3 stars, which, is still a recommendation, albeit one that has a hell of a lot of caveats on it. Anyway, that was my review for Wind and Truth. If you've read it as well, and you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear some different perspectives on this. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and take care.